If I told you that the first sci-fi movie ever made was a French flick called A Trip to the Moon by writer, director and producer Georges Méliès way back in 1902, you'd understand that it was quite a task to narrow down all the ones made since into a top 5. But being the hero that I am, I have endeavoured to do the task, and slashing a few favourites away with a black hole heavy heart, I'm happy to present you, without further ado, the top 5 sci-fi movies ever made. It might be hard for younger viewers to understand the impact created by The Matrix when it was first released in 1999, but as someone who lived through it, I can tell you that the movie infiltrated every single facet of popular culture. The Matrix was everywhere, whether that was Keanu Reeves as Neo with his Chun-Li arms, Hugo Weaving's bespectacled Mr. Smith, or that black and green waterfall of numbers that represents The Matrix itself. Sometimes you can watch these cultural events with a shake of the head and a sigh, wondering what everyone else is seeing, but The Matrix, particularly the first film, is a superb sci-fi movie. A dark fairy tale telling the story of Neo and his awakening from what we think of as the real world, but which we learn is actually a simulation used to keep humans busy while robots harvest them for energy. A fairly fresh and topical idea at the time, as the world worried about the Y2K bugs in its computers, The Matrix would have failed if it was just that. But the film ties its philosophical questions to a well-paced kung fu action story, with a likeable hero, a hateable antagonist, and a ragtag group succeeding despite the odds. It might feel a bit dated in its presentation now, but with solid performances, some great sequences and quirky ideas, The Matrix holds up well. If The Matrix is about an entire world as simulation, our film at number 4, director Alfonso Cuarón's 2013 7 Oscar-winning film Gravity, starring Sandra Bullock and George Clooney, is a much smaller sci-fi story. It tells the tale of a scientist sent up to repair the space shuttle when there's an accident and all hell breaks loose. We learn as the story goes on what propelled Sandra Bullock's character into space in the first place, and watch as her journey to safety changes her for the better. For me, Gravity is a masterpiece on at least 2 levels. The first is its storytelling. Alfonso Cuarón and his son Jonas's story is tight, focused, full of metaphors, snappy, meaningful dialogue and likeable characters. It's not just a physical rescue mission, but a mental one too, and the way Cuarón cleverly weaves the two together is mesmerising and stands up to repeated viewing. If anyone wants to learn script writing, this is the one for you. Gravity also excels in its sound and visuals. It's a stunning film that spends 99% of its time in orbit around Earth, with all the beautiful blue views you'd expect from that. There are some intense sequences in the film, like the first time the debris from the satellite comes around, or the destruction of the shuttle, that in the cinema were truly breathtaking, but are equally gripping at home. It's a bit of a cliche to say a film puts you in the shoes of its characters, but Gravity really does, and they're pretty frightening shoes. Speaking of frightening, there's a genre in movie horror storytelling called Monster in the House, which, as you might imagine, tells the story of a monster in an enclosed location and the poor souls who try to survive it. There have been a few great Monster in the House movies over the decades, Jurassic Park and Jaws being 2 great examples, but the absolute best in the genre, to my mind, is Ridley Scott's 1979 sci-fi classic Alien. The tagline of the movie is the iconic "In space, no one can hear you scream," which gives us a clue as to why Alien works so well. In Jaws and Jurassic Park, the victims can escape the monster if they manage to get far enough away. In Alien, which takes place entirely on the spaceship Nostromo, that's impossible. What this does is create a horrible sense of isolation and claustrophobia that's exacerbated by the tetchy relationships between the crew members on board and secrets that are revealed about the company that employs them. The alien stalking the ship looks a little schoolcraft project now, but it must have been terrifying back in the late 70s, sitting alongside romantic adventures like Flash Gordon and Star Wars. The pacing in Alien is superb, hinting at the monster for the first half of the film, then unleashing it in the second. Sigourney Weaver is brilliant as main character Ripley and is matched by the late Ian Holm as the creepy android Ash. The lighting is moody, the FX decent for their time, and the sound, all creaking pipes and whooshes of steam vents, great. There aren't many films that I consider perfectly balanced in all aspects, but Alien is one of them. There are a lot of criticisms you can aim at Christopher Nolan's 8th film, 2014's sci-fi epic Interstellar, and a lot of people like to do so. The script can be corny at times, parts of the story don't make sense, and the amount of times they repeat Dylan Thomas's "Do not go gentle" into that goodnight poem borders on the psychotic. But for everything it gets wrong, Interstellar gets more right. Matthew McConaughey, almost always excellent, is superb in this as protagonist Coop, a true hero who propels the film forward. He has some tough scenes, but he handles them well, as do supporting actors Matt Damon, Jessica Chastain and Anne Hathaway. But where Interstellar really flies is its sound and visuals. Nolan clearly took a strong dollop of inspiration from Stanley Kubrick's 1969 movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. The visual design of the film is so similar and looks just as fantastic. Where Nolan and his team could do something different from the norm, an example being the oddly shaped robots Case and Tars, they did, and the film feels fresh because of that. But the standout feature of Interstellar is its soundtrack by Hans Zimmer. Zimmer's not exactly short of magisterial OSTs, but Interstellar has got to be his best. Full of booming, swirling organs, it sounds like nothing else in any sci-fi I've seen. There are more than a few moments in the film that just wouldn't be the same without their accompanying music, especially the iconic docking scene, which still gives me goosebumps when I hear it. There's no question for me that the best sci-fi film ever made is another Ridley Scott movie, 1982's Blade Runner. Based on the author Philip K. Dick's book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? They did the right thing changing the title, I think. There are a dozen things you could praise about Blade Runner. Its cyberpunk atmosphere, its well-paced story, its mysteries, intriguing dialogue, the philosophical questions it raises, its great cast who underact in a way that's totally believable, its amazing sets and costumes, Rutger Hauer's incredible, somewhat ad-libbed speech in the rain at the end, and on and on. But what stands out to me, having watched Blade Runner a dozen times over the years, is just how modern it still looks. Like many great movies before the CGI revolution, it creates its world with miniature models, and it's true you have to suspend your disbelief a little for that. But the street shots, the neon lights, the huge video billboards, the billowing steam, the teeming masses, the food, the smells, there's so much detail that its world is every bit as well realised as something like Lord of the Rings or the more recent Dune films. Watching Blade Runner is like being in that version of Los Angeles. 2019 it was set, by the way, just in case you want to feel old. And it's not surprising that it's influenced so many movies since. #1 spot deserved. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the list. Feel free to suggest any favourites of your own in the comments, and this is Movie Maverick signing out.